Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so at this point we should have painted the eyeball. And you can see I have my layers over here set up for the pupil and the highlight. I'm just clicking those on and off. I've got the iris, and that's its own separate layer. And I've got the whites of the eye, and that's its own separate layer. So I really only have a couple demos left for you. The first one, we're going to start the skin, and I'm going to do some of the basic coloring of the skin in and around this. And then what I'm going to do on the last demo is we're going to just go over a little bit on how to create some of the creases for your eyelid. And we'll add just a little bit of detail to that. So today we're working on the skin tone. I think one of the things that might help us is to go down to the eyeball and find our layer that is just the whites of the eyes. And I think what we're going to do is, instead of selecting inside of it, we're going to select outside of it. And you can see that I have my little line, my little dashed line that goes around everything. And that dashed line should also be all the way around your project. So you're going to see that all the way through. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create one more new layer, and that's going to be our skin paint. All right, and we have that one set up, and we're going to go ahead and start setting with our colors. I think, as always, I kind of like to get in there and try to start off with some of the bright areas. And again, we're going to use a lot of the gray that's in the actual picture for our painting. So we don't have to paint the gray. What we're going to do is add the white with our light opacity. So I'm going to look and see there's some bright areas here, some bright areas there, and I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to switch to black, and then I might go back and forth a little bit until I get it to the exact way that I like it. For my brush, I like to work on this starting, as usual, I like to start with a larger brush first. I think maybe like anywhere between 150 to 175 pixels, anything in between there, a nice large brush. And what I do is I use a large brush to set some basic colors, and then I'll go down to a smaller brush as I go through to add more and more detail. The hardness, I'm going to move that down again to something low, I guess, under 15 or less, and I think that'll work for me. My opacity, I like to build things up slowly, so again, my opacity, I'm going to keep that down 20. I'm going to put the flow a little bit lower than that. I'll put that at 15. So my opacity is 20, the flow is 15. I've got white in my brush. The brush is nice and soft. Let's see how fast the paint comes out on this. And I'm seeing actually it's coming out super duper slow. So you know what? I'm just going to up that a little bit. I want to make my opacity a little bit higher and my flow a little bit higher. All right. And you can adjust these things as you feel necessary. And there we go, that looks a little bit better to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add a little bit, and I still like to keep these numbers pretty low because I think it gives it a nice blended and faded look. And if you end up having too much paint coming out too fast, you get kind of a choppy look to your picture. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of this, and you'll notice that the paint should not go over top of the eye itself. I'll just undo that. Because I did select outside of the eyeball. And I'm going to go take a look, and I think that I see a little bit more lightness down in here, the underneath part of the eye. And if you end up adding just a little bit too much, that's okay, because we're going to go back over it and add some black as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just get some of my basic tone. And that above the eye up here is whiter. We got some white on this side of the lid. I got a little bit of brightness on that side. And it's okay that I'm going outside of this rectangle. In fact, I think you should definitely go outside of the rectangle. We're going to clean that up later when we're done with this. So I think I've got a lot of white here, and I still have a lot of gray, and now I think I want to switch over to my black. And again, we'll have to see how fast the black, a little bit goes a long way. So with the black, this might be the case where I kind of lower that back down to my old settings to, I'll go 25 and 15. Just because the dark tends to cover pretty quickly. And I've got a little bit of darkness up in this corner, and I'm going to kind of go over that corner a bunch of times. And again, it is absolutely okay that I'm sort of going outside of the square on there. You don't have to be along those edges because we can clean that up pretty easily. I go see, and I'm just going to try to look for the areas in my picture that are a little bit darker, and I'm going to try to get those basic sort of values in. And again, we're working with, when I say values, we're talking about light and dark. Get a little bit of that in there. And probably a little bit more in here. And maybe just a little bit more in there. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to slowly try to lower the size of my brush. I've got some of the basic sort of tones in here. I'm just going to kind of go down a little bit smaller. I'm going to cut that maybe in half, say about 80. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kind of touch in and give it just a little bit of touch up in some of these areas where I feel like kind of could use a little bit more oomph around the edges. I think a little bit over here, and I'm going to kind of try to follow that curve that I created earlier for my eyelid. I'm not going to go crazy and try to redraw it. I'm going to show you a little trick not tomorrow but Monday on how to do that. But I'm going to look for some of the areas that look to me a little bit darker and have a little bit more value. All right, and the creases and the little things that you see in there, those are things that we can add later on. And I think I feel pretty decent about that so far. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my toolbar, and I'm going to go even a little bit smaller now. And just like this, the way I'm working, I think is an effective way to do this. Just try to work from a large brush to a small brush. Try to work for the general colors that you see to then excuse me, from the general sort of basic colors that you see to the smaller details. And we can add more and more details to this. We are just going to need to build it up progressively. I'll go ahead over here. Now at this point of our painting, I don't want you guys trying to put in eyelashes or the little crease in there. I really don't want you to worry about that at this point. We are going to add some of that stuff in, or at least I'm going to show you how to add some of that stuff in, but I'm not going to do it right this second. That's going to be a separate video to kind of take you through those processes. So let's just kind of focus on the basic colors here and adding just a little bit more value. Sorry about the sneezing, my allergies are acting up. Alright, I think I'm starting to get to an area where I feel pretty decent about what I have here. Feel like we could use a little bit of black in there. We could probably use a little bit underneath here. And I think I feel decent about that. A little more darkness right over here. And again, this is not a finished product as far as the skin goes. We will add a crease here, and we will add a crease there. But you can go ahead now, and if you want, if you have the basic colors in there, and you can go ahead and have a little bit of fun. I've got kind of freckles on my picture. So, with this really light brush, I'm going to kind of lower my opacity even further, and I'm going to mess around and add a little bit of freckles and little age spots in there. Just kind of tap in here and there. And just sort of add some of these little blotches that you see. I'll go ahead and put in a few more. And stuff like this, the more irregular, the better. Little spots. They've got a little bit of like texture that goes on there, so I think I'm gonna kind of bring my brush down a bit. And let's just see what that looks like. So I'm just gonna kind of scribble in here a little bit, just to kind of give the skin a little bit of texture. And I'm making my marks go in the same direction as those little sort of cracks and crevices. Now, it may not look like I'm doing much, but by doing some of this little scribbling, it kind of gives the skin a little bit more of a natural sharpness. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm adding. It's all just like some scribble scrabble in there. But when you look at it from this distance over here, it gives the feeling that we've got a little bit of, you know, natural skin dimples and wrinkles and things like that. So I'm going to continue to add a little bit of that. And like over here, I'm going to kind of make those marks sort of crisscross a little bit and just kind of go in the same direction as the skin does. And again, that's going to give the whole thing a little bit more of a realistic feel. Just kind of adding some of that scribble scrabble everywhere, but the scribbling that I'm doing is actually, again, in the same direction as some of those little marks and creases are on the skin. And this is actually a fun time. I actually like just making these random marks and stuff like that. But if you could see, the marks are all kind of going in the same direction that they are on the face. So, you know, I think a really small brush, again, low in terms of opacity and flow. And you can go ahead, and this is actually something you could probably do for those of you who have the stylus. This is a really, I guess, sort of stylus-friendly moment in our picture. I want to go ahead and I'm just going to look in here, and I think I see a little bit more darkness. I'm going to just make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm going to just come in and do a few more of these dark marks on this side. I know it doesn't look like much. There we go. But I'm going to just keep adding some of that in there. All right. And right now, for me, I feel pretty decent about what I did. I am going to do one last video, and that last video what I'm going to do is we're going to make a couple of those little creases and stuff in the skin, work on some of those folds. All right. And the eyelid fold, I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. I'm keeping that as sort of a separate kind of video. And that'll pretty much be it. I will do one more like extra credit video for eyelashes, but it's just going to be a little bit of work, so I don't want to bog you guys down too much. Now, before we're finished totally with this skin, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go find on my layers the rectangle. All right, I'm going to grab my magic wand, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select outside of that rectangle. So you can see right now I've selected outside of the rectangle. The whole picture has a dotted line around it, and there's a dotted line around that rectangle, and we should have drawn that shape early on. Now I'm going to go back to my skin paint layer, switch back to that layer, and then just have to hit either backspace or delete, and that should clean up all that extra stuff on the outside. That's why I was telling you guys you could paint outside of the lines here, because we've already created lines to kind of crispen up this and make it fit and make it work. So right now I have my first layer of skin done. The next thing I'm going to do, and there'll be a separate video, is I'm going to go over how to really build up this crease for the eyelid and maybe add a little bit more detail to it. And that's going to be it. We're going to be finished. A couple finishing touches and we're done. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope that it was helpful. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.